members, it's time and we have a quorum. The morning session will end at 1 and the afternoon session will end at 2:30 p.m. and it will end at 7 o'clock if necessary. I'll extend it by 15 minutes. Now, if members have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest, please, in accordance with Rules of Procedure, Rule 83, bracket 1, disclose the nature of the interest before you join the discussion. And also, there are rules on voting on items with financial implications. This we are still on FCR 2019 to 2033 is the 2019-20 civil service pay adjustment. With effect from the 1st of April 2019, there are adjustments to the civil service pay scales as follows: the increase of 4.75% in the dollar value of the pay points in the directorate and upper salary band. As for master pay scale 34 is at $74,515 and MPS 35 at $75,265. As for general discipline services officer pay scale 20 and police pay scale 36 is at $74,390, and then GDSO 21 and PPS 37 $75,135. There's also an increase of 5.6% in the dollar value of pay points in the middle and lower salary bands. Corresponding adjustments to the provisions for aided schools, ICAC, and subventions will mirror that. And then, the adjustments to subventions are price adjusted on the basis of formulae that include a factor of civil service pay adjustment. We have Mr. Lo Chi Kwong and his team joining us today. Mr. James To. Mr. Chairman, you read out all the introduction again. Does it mean that we're starting new from the beginning? Of course not. Why not? Well, this is just an extension meeting. It's just that there was the epidemic. Every time I would read that. No, but Mr. Chairman, because last week there was already item in between, so we have to start again. No, that's not the case. What is your legal basis for starting anew? Perhaps Mr. Eddie Chu could explain that. Is it a point of order? Yes. Okay, please, 1 minute. Well, Mr. Chairman, 1 minute cannot resolve the matter. Yes, please. You've already written in, right? No. I'm not talking about that. My question is, now we are going by the Finance Committee Rule 10 and 11, and then the chairman has the power to call a special meeting. But if the chairman calls a special meeting on an item that's related to a funding proposal, then in accordance with Rule 11, it has to be the item we've been discussing all along. But then last Friday you called a special meeting. No, you didn't actually call it a special meeting. Rather, you call it a special meeting arrangement. And in that meeting, we considered a new item. Now, if we allow you to make such a so-called special meeting arrangement to deal with new items, well, then there's no end to that. Your time is up. I've heard what you said. Are there other members on a similar point? Dr. Priscilla Leung. I raised my hand first, actually. Dr. Priscilla Leung. Well, I definitely do not agree we should start afresh. Second point, now Mr. Eddie Chu is... last time he could have told us that we shouldn't have that meeting and not endorse that item. Today he's going back on things, and I'm totally against it because we've had ample time to discuss the item. I think we should proceed with this item, and then at the end of the discussion, we should put it to a vote. We should bring this to an end. Whether we're supporting it or not, I think there's been enough discussion. They've been repeating a point that they wanted to take out the police force pay adjustment, and we've said many times that we don't agree to that, so we need to end this matter. eventually. Mr. Andrew Wan, well, I don't agree with the conclusion of Dr. Priscilla Leung. Yes, I think we should proceed with the normal meetings. But here there is a major technical deficiency here. Mr. Eddie Chu already explained his case. He referred to Rules 10 and 11, and if that was according to his interpretation, if what what could be done, if what was done last time was allowed, then it's going to be a problem, because then you will be able to make a special meeting arrangement from now on, and then different items may jump the queue. Now, last time there was this interruption. Does it mean that we have to push items back as a result? Items that are already on the agenda, that is. Mr. Ray Chen, well, let's not count last Friday. Before the meeting before that, we were working on Rule 39(2). Some members have moved a motion to adjourn. And that item is has adjourned because the government has tabled a different item to the Finance Committee for consideration, and that is the $30 billion anti-epidemic fund. That's why we do not need to proceed with the motion to adjourn under Rule 39(1). So you have to, reorder the agenda again. So for this item, we have to start afresh. Now you can we can go back to summoning officials and so on, because you can't just start 10 different meetings with 10 different motions, and whichever can go first, it goes first. No, we only have just one Finance Committee. Next, Mr. Jeremy Tam. Now I'm reading the rules of procedure. I'm trying to see where you derive your power from, so that in the middle of an item on civil service pay adjustment, before the item is concluded, you decided it could be adjourned or suspended. So under which rule did you do that? That's the first question. Second question is, now that you have done so, does it mean the government could only withdraw the item? Or are you saying that with what you have done, the government has withdrawn this item, so we are coming back to the item, as a new item? Now, because I couldn't find it, maybe you can tell me, where did you derive your power from to do that? Now, in between two items, you can make different arrangements. For example, you switch the order of items A and B. That's allowed. But in the middle of an item, you suspend it, and then you bring in a new meeting. Where did you derive the power from? Next, Dr. K.K. Kwok. Now, I want to talk about rules. There is an item under consideration. The government just took it out, and then it's putting it back again. That's what happened. Now, in the past, we've spent some time to ask to summon the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Chris Tang, to come here. But in that discussion, it's actually never been concluded. Now, for the civil service pay adjustment or police pay adjustment, we haven't completed our discussion. But obviously, the government believed that there were other issues more important than civil service pay adjustments, such as the anti-epidemic effort, and we could understand that. But it's not up to you to bend the rules. So when you feel like it, you make us discuss the anti-epidemic fund first, and then you won't allow us to talk about something of great concern to people of Hong Kong. People in Hong Kong are so unhappy with the police. Why can't we discuss it thoroughly? Now, in accordance with Rule 11 of the Finance Committee procedure, it says here that if an item on the agenda scheduled for discussion, any items on the agenda scheduled for discussion but not dealt with at the meetings will be carried over to the next meeting, or if the chairman decides to, a special meeting. Now, my understanding is last time when we had that meeting on the $30 billion anti-epidemic fund, of course, it is a continuation of the meetings meeting of the Finance Committee, we never stopped in the middle. And that item, the anti-epidemic fund, came before the civil service pay adjustment. Well, that's understandable because, or reasonable because it's urgent. So that means the government has actually withdrawn the item on civil service pay adjustment. Now we are resuming our meeting. Then, in accordance with the meeting procedure, we should consider the item anew, and we're just following the rules. So it's straightforward. Any other questions, please? No? Then I have to deal with the points of order. My understanding is, or something that anyone would easily grasp, that is, the meeting is not finished, so of course we'll resume the next time. Why is it that just because we suspend meeting, then we have to start all over again? If that's the case, we can never finish discussing anything. So having heard your views, my decision is that, let me finish, please. My ruling is that, first of all, I do not believe this is a point of order. And it does not make sense at all if you ask me. I won't speculate the reason. It's just that you don't understand the rules of procedure or the Finance Committee procedure. I would ask you to talk to the legal advisor and take your time. Now, let's not waste time here because we've already spent 23 hours on this item. It's unduly long. So I've made my ruling. Mr. Andrew Wang. I asked a specific question. Can the legal advisor answer us? Well, if you don't agree, it's one thing, but that is the logic. If you could do this now, maybe we're wrong. Give us a reason why we are wrong. If you could start 10 different special sessions and then the government could bypass all procedures. No, can the legal advisor answer us? No, what I'm saying is that this is something so straightforward. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. That's why I'm not going to spend time on it. But you've got, additions, subtractions, and division and so on, all wrong. No, please not talk about something else. No, I'm not talking about different things. How do you know we won't pursue it legally? I'm saying this. We welcome any legal challenge from you because it's something so basic and I have to stop the meeting for you to dwell on that. Then I really shouldn't, stay as the chairman. It's something really so basic. But there are items that, jump the queue. So, okay. I see Eddie Chu, Mr. Eddie Chu. What do you mean 1 + 1 = 2? You ask the general public, they won't agree it's 1 + 1 = 2. It's not that. Now, let's look at the meeting notice for the meeting on the 21st of February. You never said it's a special meeting. You said it's a special meeting arrangement. So it's a special meeting arrangement. It's clear, therefore, that it is an continuation of our consideration of funding proposals. That means last time we were talking about the civil service pay adjustment, and then you decided to put an item in the middle of that. That means the government has already withdrawn the item on the civil service pay adjustment. So today, well, we accept, if you want to consider this item again, we accept that the government is tabling this item anew, and then we should start afresh. You can't say that we're not making sense. Please tell clearly what you meant by 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, I've heard others. We could still, continue with this, but after this round, really, I must make a ruling. You don't have to agree with me. You could seek judicial review. Please, I'm trying to chair meetings. Stay calm. Please don't shout. Next, Mr. Alvin Cheong, please. Mr. Chairman, many members asked a point of order. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm right," and then you proceed, because this really will affect the legitimacy of today's meeting. It's also a question of how we deal with this item today. Could you not help members out here? Just now, Mr. Eddie Chu told you that last Friday, that meeting had to be an extension of normal meetings, just that there was a special item. So it's not a special meeting as defined in the rules. So it's something clear enough. It's not about 1 + 1 = 2. So you need to give us a clear explanation. about the basis of this meeting and the basis of the meeting last week. It's not just for you to decide. The legal advisor has to help members to sort out the facts before we could continue.
Next, Jeremy Tam. Chairman, we're clear on this. What's the basis, what's the provision in the rules of procedure that you relied on as a basis that you made this decision to adjourn the item for the civil service pay adjustment, and then you put in the item about the anti-epidemic fund, and now you're resuming this discussion about the civil service pay adjustment? What's the provision in the books that's your basis for doing this? It's not. I'm not saying. You can't just say that someone's fine with it and just let it happen. I'm asking you, what's your basis? What's your provision? Which particular provision? I have reserved 20 seconds for you. This is not a Q&A. This is not. We're not playing games here. You have to give me all the points of order, and I will respond to all of them. I raised my question once. You didn't address my question. You did not address my question. What's the provision you're invoking to exercise this special power? Next, Ms. Claudia Mo. Thank you, Chair. I hope you can calm down and don't get so worked up in the morning. You're saying that every person can understand this, but that's not the case. We're talking about common sense. This is a matter of common sense, but we're not in some sort of quiz. We're saying that we go by rules in the legislative chamber here. We're talking about rules of procedure. Those in power are saying that, hey, we have been doing this for all the time. You just follow the convention. You're saying 1 + 1 is equals to 2. You're saying 1 + 1 equals to 3. It's your word for it. It's hard for people to accept. The legal advisor certainly has to make it clear why we're doing this. But there's more to that. I hope that the clerk can also clarify this matter, can help us. We're seeing this happening. Is this against our rules of procedure? Dr. Priscilla Leung, Chair. First, the other members, if they had any objection, they should have raised those objections in the previous meetings. But the problem here is that if there's so many points of order to raise, how about we hand this matter over to the Committee on CRP, and according to this previous case, Wang Yukman, involving Mr. Wang Yukman, I think they certainly have the power to make this kind of decision. Since members have objections and they're saying they do not rule out going to judicial review, they can go ahead. The results from judicial reviews is usually it's something about negating what we passed last time, meaning the anti-epidemic fund we passed last time. But my opinion is that the chairman of the Finance Committee absolutely has the discretion to make meeting arrangements like this. And when we see the haggling like this, it's against our rules of procedure. Dr. Fernando Chang, Chair. I think Dr. Priscilla Leung has no idea what we are talking about here. We're not talking about the previous meeting about anti-epidemic fund. We're talking about the civil service pay adjustment. It has to be in line with our rules of procedure. Each member here is referring to Rule 11 from the procedure of the Financial Committee. We're not talking about the continuation of a previous items. We talked about this 30 billion anti-epidemic fund. That was obviously a continuation of Finance Committee meeting. And this is the same today. We're continuing something from last time. We had a new item, anti-epidemic fund, last time. So if we're talking about civil service pay this time, we should treat it as a new item. But then according to the rules, we should start from scratch on this item about the civil service pay adjustment. Chairman, please go follow the rules. You can't just say it's your word above everyone else's. You have to follow the rules. You can't behave like that, Chairman. I'll let you finish, Mr. Ray Chen. Chair, it's a very simple matter. You have to give us an answer. To make this analogy, it's like production line here at the Finance Committee. We're talking about this pay adjustment. And then the government decided to talk about the 30 billion anti-epidemic fund. Okay, last time no one raised any objection, but then you have to address this point. Can we have multiple production lines at the same time? So we somehow shelved one item because that wasn't going well, and then we start off a new production line, and then we keep setting up new production line. We couldn't do that in the past. In the past, when we had special meetings in the past for the finance committee, we weren't like having multiple production lines. In the past, say we had stuff like vote of no confidence or amendment to rules of procedure. Were we able to have different production lines going on at the same time? Now, before we complicate this matter any further, a word from me first. I think you have been overcomplicating something, and you're digressing, talking about everything else. Clark has something to say so that everyone has more information on this before we go on with the discussion. Briefly, at the meeting on 21st of February, we were talking about the anti-epidemic fund. That, according to the convention, according to Rule 71(6), the chairman has the power to determine the date and the venue of the meeting. The chairman can decide on the time of the meeting. As for the paragraph 10 from the procedure on the finance committee, that provision has something to say about the arrangements of the meetings. In the beginning of the year, there will be a discussion with the government, and members will be informed of the schedule of the meetings to happen in the year. In the final sentence, the chairman may decide to convene special meetings to consider urgent items. It's clearly stated that the chairman can convene special meetings to deal with urgent matters. And then paragraph 11, the last sentence. If there's any item that cannot be dealt with at a certain meeting on the same day, the same item will be dealt with, carried over to the next meeting, or if the chairman decides to a special meeting. That's the usual practice. The next meeting will be used to discuss the item, or it will be dealt with at a special meeting upon the chairman's decision. Paragraph 42, paragraph 43, paragraph 42. After a chairman calls a meeting to order, he normally deals with the business left over from a previous meeting, if any. That's the usual thing he would do, dealing with something left over from a previous meeting. After we looked at the arrangements, we discussed the matter with the legal advisor and the chairman. Clearly, the chairman is empowered by these provisions to make special meeting arrangements for urgent business, so that the finance committee can deal with urgent matters, especially urgent funding requests. As for we have here civil service pay adjustment, the government has never withdrawn this item. This item is still on the agenda of the finance committee. In the past, we had something similar. There were precedents. Agenda items were discussed at one or two meetings. And then more urgent items were put on the agenda and prioritized. And there was this item, FCR 2015-16-34. That item was about Hong Kong Police Force replacing a computer system and the criminal intelligence systems. So that was something about the computer systems and platforms. On the 22nd of January and 30th of January, there were 2 meetings, but the discussion was not completed. So the government proposed, and the chairman of the Finance Committee agreed to insert other more urgent items, something about the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, the express rail link system. Those were the item about the police force systems was never withdrawn. The Finance Committee was never passed anything like an adjournment for those items. So the item was still there on the agenda. On 22nd April 2016, the item about replacing the police community systems were still being discussed. The discussion was resumed. Since we have all this information, I think you can all have confidence that I'm making a lawful and reasonable ruling here. Let's return to the item we were discussing previously. Last time, Mr. Ted Hui proposed an adjournment of the item. Now we will continue to deal with Mr. Ted Hui's motion. First, Dr. K.K. Kwok, Dr. Priscilla Leung, and Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. We'll start with Dr. K.K. Kwok. Anyone else wants to join this? Point of order? Whose point of order is it? Mr. Eddie Chu, please. Thank you, Chair. Last night, I sent a letter to the Civil Service Bureau and Chairman and the Financial Services and Treasury Bureau. I have this problem with this legal basis of this item. There's something wrong. The Finance Committee, what's the provision that we're relying on, and what previous decisions that we were relying on to approve a new pay scale for the civil service? I raised this question in January, and up to this point, I don't see a response coming from the government. I doubt they can address my question. So I'm wondering, for our secretariat or legal advisors, can you help us here? For the Finance Committee, what's the power? What's our power on this matter? If we pass or fail to pass this item, what will happen to the government? There's nothing about that in the paper. Maybe we'll have government representatives to address this. Ms. Alice Lau, Chair. I think the concern of Mr. Eddie Chu is that why are we coming to the Finance Committee with this item about the civil service pay? I think we can understand that civil service pay, that's part of the expenditure of the government. Every year, we take the expenditure of the government, and then we put that into the expenditure budget, and we take it to the LegCo, we make it public, and we come to the Finance Committee for the legal power to incur these expenses. If we see the total expenditure in the estimate, we also have information on the upper limit of the establishment for each government department. So one way for the Legislative Council, or specifically the Finance Committee, to control the expenditure of the government is to look at the establishment, but then we need more than just information on the size of the establishment. We also need something else, and that's the pay scale. The pay scale and the establishment for each government department. That's how we arrive at the expenditure for the civil service pay for each government department. That's the mechanism we have in place. So every time, if the government has to make changes to this mechanism, so say the pay scale, so we have to go by the rules. So this is a time-honored practice. The government issues documents to the Finance Committee. We include information on changes to the pay scale. And then we come to the Finance Committee for approval. Can you just hold up? Just hold up. Let her finish, please. Chair.
So to continue, Mr. Chairman, In other words, say we come to the Finance Committee and then the Finance Committee approves the adjustment to the pay scale, then based on the approved pay scale, new pay scale, then we will work out for each department the expenditure for each department, with this revised pay scale. Now, Mr. Eddie Chu asked in the letter what would happen if the proposal is not approved. Well, if the proposal is not approved, then we have to go back to the old pay scale that was previously approved by the Finance Committee, and then we will use the pay amount there, and then we multiply it to work out by the ceiling of the establishment, and then work out the total expenditure for the department. So that's why every time when there's to be a change, we come to this Finance Committee. The significance of that is that we are seeking the approval of the Finance Committee to adjust our expenditure on civil service pay, and that's the original intention of that, and that's been the established practice. Mr. Eddie Chu, thank you. At least you answer. You gave me the answer on the consequence, but when you talk about a consequence, actually we couldn't find a basis for that. You said that for many years this has been the practice, that is the chief executive would make such a decision and then come to the Finance Committee for approval. But there is no protection or safeguard to either side, because there is not a piece of legislation to confirm that the Finance Committee has the power to approve civil pay service pay adjustment. You can't find that legal basis. You're just saying that this is binding as long as the Finance Committee, if the Finance Committee vetoes it, then we can proceed. But then I can't find a legal basis for that. You said at the beginning that whether it's the budget, when we talk about the overall expenditure on civil service pay, well, that's a separate matter. Here, through the budget or through the appropriation bill, we paying, approving the overall civil service pay that we know, because it's in that estimates. But is there, which is the piece of legislation say that the Finance Committee has the power to decide on the civil service pay adjustment, and that is binding on the government? You're not able to answer me. Please be specific. Well, I mentioned just now, for all government expenditure under the Public Finances Ordinance, it must be, given authority by the Legislative Council. So civil service pay expenditure, of course, is part of the government expenditure, so we need the authorization of LegCo. And every year, how we seek that authorization is by asking the Legislative Council to approve the budget and the estimates. Well, in the estimates, you will see that for civil service expenditure, we only mention the establishment ceiling. But then, of course, there are different ranks and grades of civil servants translated into some, then it will be different. So how can we tell that by the establishment ceiling, then we're able to tell the amount? Well, please let me finish. Permanent Secretary. Now, or Mr. Eddie Chu, are you saying that in future, when there's any civil service pay adjustment, there's no need to come to the Finance Committee? Can you make it clear first, please? No, I'm hoping that we won't get ask the government to explain it. We will ask our own legal advisor to explain it, because both sides have to put forward their arguments properly. Now, you can't say that it's been the practice and now you're challenging me. Is it right? Then we don't have the power to approve it. I don't know. I can't jump to any conclusion. But if the Legislative Council itself doesn't come to any judgment, then maybe we could have talk about this for 20-odd hours. We could be standing on quicksand, because we don't have a solid basis. So that's why the Finance Committee must first come to some sort of judgment to see whether we could do it. The government, of course, is really clumsy in explanation. They simply cannot tell us what is the legal basis for doing this. Mr. Eddie Chu, I believe the Legislative Council believes this is lawful and reasonable. It's also necessary. The government also believes it is lawful, reasonable, and necessary. It's only you who think we are standing on quicksand. Well, we can't say that just because you think we are standing on quicksand, so also we say that then agree what we've been doing over the years has been wrong. So we can't just stop here and wait for you to find out. You know, your reasoning also does not have any legal basis. Just because you raise it, so we have to stop everything and let you find out, right? But let me finish. But then, because I want the meeting to be conducted smoothly, I'll invite the legal advisor to explain the matter. And please don't use that as an excuse again to stall our meeting. Okay? Now, legal advisor. Now, and next then we must go to the agenda item. We have already spent many hours. You know, before the epidemic is over, we're still coming back to meeting because we want to take things forward. We want us to move on as a community. So we can't just dwell on issues without any factual basis. So let's hear out the legal advisor and please not dwell on it anymore. Otherwise, we're not doing justice to members who come back and secretariat staff who come back here despite the risk of infection. Let's proceed. Really, your quicksand theory is based on quicksand, I must say. Now, Dr. K.K. Kwok, can you speak on the motion to adjourn? Mr. Eddie Chu? Mr. Chairman, I am not a lawyer. So it's not that I'm just coming up with a theory, but I'm a member of this council. I've been going through your documents since the 1980s, but so far I've not found any legal basis as to why the Finance Committee could discuss this item here. So either the government or our own legal advisor, I hope, would provide the legal basis. The government's not able to do so. That's why I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, you should invite our own legal advisor to tell us. Don't say that I'm trying to pose as an expert. No, I'm just a member of this council. I must perform a duty and find out what is the basis for this discussion. Well, the legal advisor is coming up here. Well, let's not waste time now. Let's proceed with the item that we haven't finished. Dr. K.K. Kwok, please. Well, it doesn't take long for us to wait for the legal advisor. For all members here, we would like to know what is the basis for this discussion. I don't think a few minutes matter that much. Anything else there? Yes, Mr. Ho Kai-ming. Well, we are in this meeting. Let's follow the agenda. We're not having an academic discussion here. We are already in the middle of a meeting. We should proceed with the agenda, and then we shouldn't just have this academic discussion about what we've been doing in the past 30 years. But you know, when the legal advisor gets here, we are ready to listen to his explanation. Well, Mr. Chairman, you have already made the ruling. That is, we should go back to the motion to adjourn. So now, if a single member could not follow what's going on, or if they want, they could go to judicial review. Please not waste time anymore. You've already made a ruling. We can't just dwell on this just because a single person wouldn't let go. No, we have plenty of work to do. We can't just let a single person to dwell on this just because he couldn't follow the logic. And that he hasn't done his homework. We have to consider there are other members here. Yes, I fully appreciate. Anyway. Mr. Eddie Chu told us that he's been looking up documents since the 1980s. Well, next time when you do research like that, please ask a lawyer to help you. You know, because the lawyers are paid so much that they may have a different view than what an ordinary person or lay person would have. You know, you can't just raise these items all the time like this. Otherwise, we don't have time for it. We're really busy. Legal advisor, I think you've heard what the question was. That is, a member asked, what is the piece of legislation that's relevant for the Finance Committee to consider civil service pay adjustment. So I hope after the legal advisor has given you explanation, we will proceed. Please don't use any such excuse again. Legal Advisor, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For civil service pay expenditure, each year, there is the annual estimates tabled by the government, and that's the basis of civil expenditure and civil service pay. That's in accordance with Section 5 of the Public Finances Ordinance. There's mention of the annual estimates. That's Section 5, bracket 3. There are different heads and subheads to explain the to tell us about the expenditure of government, and the items are listed out. And then we will be told the amount. It could be a total amount, or in dollar terms, or it could be in the form of the establishment ceiling and the ceiling for such expenditure. Now, for civil service pay expenditure, it is recurrent expenditure, so it's reflected in the annual estimates. Now, this time round, we have civil service pay adjustment, and with a pay adjustment, it will involve revising the expenditure in the estimates in accordance with Section 8 of the Public Finances Ordinance. If we want to revise the approved estimate, then there must be approval given by the Finance Committee. So on civil service pay adjustment, in accordance with Section 8 of the Public Finances Ordinance, the Finance Committee has the power to approve it. Now, just now I heard the question was that how come we are not approving the amounts, instead we're approving the pay scale? Well, I believe that is one way to do it, because if in the estimates, appropriation is given on the basis of ranks and number of posts. So if there's an adjustment, the pay scale has to be adjusted to effect the adjustment. Therefore, to adjusting the pay scale is a way to revise the approved estimate. And so through this means, the Finance Committee is asked to approve that. So I don't see why, therefore, the Finance Committee does not have the power to revise the pay scale to effect civil pay service pay adjustment, because this is about the financial commitment on civil service pay expenditure. So I think the legal advisor explained that clearly. If you have follow-up questions, please be brief, because we really are running out of time. Mr. Eddie Chu. Well, a quick follow-up question. In 1983, we looked at the delegation of powers to the financial secretary by the Finance Committee. Increasing the pay via the pay scale does not equate revising the estimates. So when we talk about increasing pay, it's not about revising the estimates, but rather here we talk about the pay scale. Now the powers, according to all the government documents, rest with the chief executive. There's no document say that the power actually rests with the Finance Committee. That's why on this point I would like to discuss it with the legal advisor. For the increase in pay or adjustment, or pay adjustment, or it doesn't mean that it's a revision of the estimate in accordance with Section 8 of the Public Finances Ordinance, PFO. Now, my understanding is if the pay scale is revised, is adjusted, that means there'll be increase in expenditure, so the total amount will have to be revised. Perhaps the government could also explain that.
Chair, we agree with the interpretation by the legal advisor, since there are changes to the pay scale. Say there is an upward adjustment to the salaries at different levels of the pay scale, and given the same establishment, there will be an increase in financial expenses, and that will go beyond the approved estimate, and that's why, according to the public finance ordinance, the government will have to ask the finance committee for approval. That's how it can pay the government can pay salaries based on the new pay scale. Mr. Li Chair. Final question. Please don't get in my way, please. Chair, let him finish. The chairman will make a decision. Chair, I said that it's about this back payment arrangement. This is not something decided by the finance committee. They should go through the council, the full council. There's this paper to be passed after the passing of the budget of the appropriation bill. That's my understanding. This isn't something that should go through the finance committee. Who will take the question? Ms. Amy. Chair. Every year, we also have a bill on supplementary appropriation. For the executive authorities will, through its delegated authority, will consolidate everything and then approach the legislature and by way of legislation make the arrangement valid. So I'm saying that this pay adjustment is about delegated authority. The pay increase is about delegated authority. That's what we're talking about with this supplementary appropriation. Mr. Adichu, it's almost an hour now. I hope that other members, not just Mr. Adichu, if you have questions about the rules of procedure, please approach the legal advisor or send me a letter. Don't take up a meeting time for these matters. I have no choice. If I just let you go on, we can't go on with the meeting. I hope we can have a rational discussion and reach a rational decision. Carry on with the meeting instead of wasting time. Everyone's risking infection to come to the meeting today. We're not talking about enriching your knowledge about the procedures of the meeting. We should get things done. Let's get on with the item. Next, Dr. K.K. Kwok. About his views on adjourning this item. I support adjourning this item about the civil service pay. This is what we see now as a pattern. The loyalists is taking advantage of the Legislative Council, handing over the hard-earned money of Hong Kong people for the rise in the pay for the police force. We have 68.8% supporting reorganizing the police force. More than half of them giving 0 marks for the police force. Starting from June last year, police have been beating young people up. And within 2 years, there's a 25% increase in the funds for the police. Then the police will be hiring more people to beat people up. For the whole thing, is it the case that the government is not at fault? The police has not done nothing wrong, and the Hong Kong police who are at fault? Remember the August 31st incident at Prince Edward Station? The police beating people up indiscriminately, beating up the passengers. People in Hong Kong, around the world, they could see with their eyes what the police did. And there are all these arrests. They arrest people. People talk to the street, asking the extradition bill be withdrawn. But then somehow is it that everyone else is at fault, but then the chief executive and her secretaries are wrong. This is it's shameful that the government comes to us to ask for pay rise for the police. We have been asking to single out the pay rise for the police. More than 50% people giving 0 marks to the police. Can you not see that? The pro-establishment camp, do you see the popular opinion? And then you're doing all this window dressing now. All this hard-earned money of the people. This is more than 100 billion. We're dealing with this epidemic. This is not an act of God. This is an artificial disaster. This is the fault of the chief executive, Carrie Lam, her officials, and more than 30,000 police officers beating people up every week. The people are just asking the bill withdrawn, and then all the people got beaten up. All these incidents, August 31st, and a range of other things. Hong Kong people will never forget those dates in August or in October. And now you're telling us that you are safeguarding the police. You're asking for a pay rise for the police. You see what Chen Kin-po, the chairman, is doing. They want to make sure that the police get a pay rise. What we're doing here is to stop the pay rise for the police, not a cent. We're not going to stand in the way of pay rise for the civil service. But what the police force is another thing. The police force are the enemy of the people. The people of Hong Kong hate it. They hate the police force for doing bad things for the government. We will oppose any pay rise for the police. Dr. Priscilla Leung. Point of order, or is it a question? Point of order. Thank you, Chair. I heard Dr. K.K. Kwok saying that the police force beat people to death. Can I ask him to clarify who got beaten to death by the police? This kind of thing, he should find out about it himself. We'll have a discussion after the meeting. Next, Dr. Priscilla Leung. If it weren't because there were so many people inciting people to violence, setting people on fire, throwing petrol bombs at the offices of councillors, if it weren't because of all that, then we wouldn't be where we are. We would need the police force to keep us safe. If we were just, you talked about these rioters they were throwing petrol bombs everywhere, but then you don't see, apparently you were fine with that. Chair, we're talking about whether to adjourn this item about civil service pay. For me, my view of these people who opposed the extradition bill and those trade unions openly taking part in protests and all those teachers and teaching staff, and let's look at RTHK being very selective in their programs, inciting hatred. We filed complaints to the FEHD, all these things on the linen walls, the smear messages on the linen walls, but the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department never did anything. The list goes on. We can keep telling us all these problems with the civil service. If we can go on about this substandard behavior of the civil service. Look at what Hong Kong is today. For civil servants who have been standing fast at their post, the civil service pay rise means a lot to them. The money is vital for them. You're saying that you're not object what we passed at the last meeting, being the NP fund, but then there are so many people are dragging their feet here. The government has been slow in doing what they are, but even the Legislative Council members here are stalling everything. They want to drag everything out. So they're just in unity with what the government is doing, dragging its feet. Those who style themselves as the cheerleaders of the anti-extradition movement, but they never cut ties with violence. All these opposition camp lawmakers. Chair, if we do not adjourn this item about civil service pay, let me make this clear. There might be individual police officers who didn't do their job right, but that doesn't mean that we should object. That doesn't mean that we should single out police pay. If we pass this item, we're not going to single anyone's pay rise out. Chair, Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, Chair. I object to adjourning this item. What's rationality today? We can have a whole discussion about that. Does it mean you have to be absolutely logical with what you say? Well, the we burn and you burn mentality is certainly irrational. No one's winning. No one has anything to gain from that. One more thing, Chair. The so-called yellow circle. I believe the legal sector is very much in that they want people to go to court, and then crowdfunding, and then there are all these lawsuits going on. The legal sector has a lot to gain. But what about those who end up behind bars? They have to get their families to raise funds for their lawsuit. For those behind the rioters, those behind the rioters now picking on the police force. It's clear. What do we mean by civil service? All those employed by the government. If you get to cherry pick who counts as a civil servant, that goes against the grain. In the terms of employment for civil service, and as chairman, I'm the chairman of the panel on civil service. I know that it's part of the terms of employment. There is this civil service pay adjustment every year. If the pay for a certain department is singled out, there will be legal challenges. You have a contract. Everyone's a civil contract. You have your pay adjustment every year. You can't just cherry pick which government department to grant a pay rise. If we allow any department's pay rise to get singled out, this is going to be a terrible precedent. This will be a slippery slope, and because you will have future cases where the government departments will get picked on. The opposition camp or the pro-riot camp, whatever we call it, you can't just let the government get held to ransom. We're just talking about civil servants and no cherry picking in the civil service pay adjustment. Mr. Christopher Chung. I'm clearly opposed to adjourning this item on civil service pay. We all know that civil service pay as an item, it was something meant for a discussion on the 5th of July last year. Was because the Legislative Council complex was ransacked last year. We couldn't hold a meeting last year. And this year, we have the novel coronavirus. 3 meetings of the Finance Committee were cancelled. Now, there's a huge backlog of funding items. Many of them about livelihood. They are pressing items. The Pan-Democrats are still trying to adjourn this item. I think they're disregarding the livelihood issues of people and disregarding and turning a blind eye to the fact that people are in misery. About the civil service pay, I hope that the Pan-Democrats shouldn't just dwell on the performance of certain police officers and stand in the way of the civil service pay adjustment. If they want to, is it that they want to single out police pay rise, or if they're adjourning this item, these shenanigans, they're picking on the police force. They're trying to throw the baby out with bathwater. And this is not fair. Over the past more than 6 months, and we have the novel coronavirus here, people's lives have been seriously affected. I hope that members from the pro-democracy camp shouldn't put politics first, should scrutinize every item. They shouldn't stall the civil service pay rise any longer. Civil servants should get the recognition they deserve for the work they did. Mr. Roy Kwong, 3 minutes. Chair, take a look at the community. Look at what the coronavirus has done to us. Everyone's in a bad shape. We really shouldn't be talking about civil service pay rise here. We should be talking about economizing here. The pay rise includes police pay rise. People don't get paid for no reason. We know what happened. Pro-establishment camp. I'm not going to name names. Take a look for yourself. See for yourselves. Look at the indiscriminate arrests and police brutality, the picking on young people, students, and now the police is coming back to us asking us for a pay rise. At this difficult times, we should be economizing, cutting costs. When you're telling us that you should get pay rise and all those 950 million overtime allowance. The chief executive, Carrie Lam, obviously wants to burn and take everyone under. And recently, the chief executive has been accusing even members of the pro-establishment camp of not supporting her. Ask yourself, you entered politics, you want to get something done. Let's talk about, we have this deficit going on here. We were talking about we shouldn't be giving more than $20 billion to the police force. Instead, we should be distributing the money for our citizens. We haven't sorted out all these expenses, and now you're saying pay rise. Sure, pay rise for firefighters and medical staff, or those serving the public, but what right does the police have to ask us for a pay rise? We haven't even sorted out what's right and wrong. Members saying that, yeah, individual police officers weren't doing their job right. But then we don't see any police officer held to account. There was this officer riding on her motorcycle, ramming into people, but then it was just fine. In other cases, we see cases, people beating people up, but then there was no follow-up on those cases, no investigation. Those people watching our webcast now, ask yourself, not a single police officer has been investigated. But then in other sectors, they have different kinds of consequences. White terror, scores get settled. There's this indignation in people. As the chairman just said, hey, we have this novel coronavirus. Can we just get on with this item? Let's talk about anti-epidemic effort. Even if the chief executive isn't doing her job, we should be doing our job at the Legislative Council. But then you're saying that the police should get their pay. You're fine with that? We're talking about the pay civil service adjustment. Can we talk about a reduction in the pay? Can we just economize, cut costs? Those of you who want to speak, just press your button. Chair, simply put, we journalists, we can let civil service have their pay rise, but not the police. That's all from me. We talked.
Well, you talk about the purpose of meetings, so I must clarify. It's straightforward. It's not that we just pick out the civil service pay adjustment as our item for discussion. Rather, this item is dragged on for over a month, and we're not just talking about the pay rise for police, but rather we're going through with the established mechanism of civil service pay adjustment. No one comes to this meeting just because we want to give a pay rise to the police. No one is here for that. So don't try to accuse us wrongly. Members are, running the risk of the epidemic to come back to the meeting, and staff are coming to work, but please don't accuse them wrongly. While the opposition camp has to put on the show to the very end, they, really good. They have really good acting. Now we all know why there is this motion. A German motion. It's just a show. They try to drag it on for as long as possible. Even a minute longer is better. Why are they doing this? Who are they trying to show this to? Well, it's those behind them, of course. You know who these people are. One of them was arrested today, and people really happy. Some people are really happy about it. So those behind the scene, have been arrested. And then, of course, the second time people want to show what they're doing is people who've been misled by them, who've been, conned by them. That is what they call brothers at the front line. Now, these people here are, feeding on others, shedding blood, and of course they have to put up a show and show those people. Otherwise, how can they answer their own conscience? I think for anyone who knows a little bit about economics, we know this is not really pay rise as such. It's based on the pay trend survey, and it's just an adjustment. If we don't have this pay increase, then that means the pay is take-home pay will become less. So, and it's based on the data from the previous year, and then we've made this decision. Now, you talking about the epidemic, we need to fight epidemic and so on. That's exactly the issue. Even if civil servants don't get a pay rise, their pay is frozen or even reduced, and so it will only add to the problem. Because, civil service pay has always been an pay indicator for the private sector. And if civil servants don't get a pay rise, then that means in the private sector, people will suffer a huge pay decrease. So I think we've had enough discussion this item. We should put it to a vote. Let's not deal with these pointless motions to adjourn and so on. It's a waste of time. Of course, different people have different views on different departments. Of course, just as we are totally unhappy with the radio Hong Kong, radio and television Hong Kong. They make false reports. They have cheap programs. And then they are dominating the station to give just one-sided views. And so shouldn't we freeze the pay for those working at RTHK? But that's not really the issue, because we look at the civil service as a whole. So let's not drag it on any longer. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, the pay percentage, pay rise percentage should be decided by a particular committee. Now you're talking about saving money. Well, it's almost April. There will be a new set of pay indicators. I'm sure the social condition will be taken into account of that. Please don't try to confuse the public to say that we should deduct pay now, because we're talking about pay adjustment from last year. And then many of in the opposition camp saying that certain civil servants are performing poorly, and then the fire services are serving people of Hong Kong, healthcare staff are serving people of Hong Kong. Well, it's true. The police are also serving people of Hong Kong. If someone comes out to break the law, of course the police will stop them, and they're serving the public by doing so. And then some said that the police force have killed so many people, and people won't forget about August the 31st, blah, blah, blah. Why are we in such a pathetic state? It's because many members, there are so much false news around, and then many members endorsing such false news. So you have brainwashed the young people, and you make it more difficult for the police to enforce the law. That's why they have to work longer over time. So this is a vicious cycle. Now, you think the police are hurting the people of Hong Kong, but we believe the police are helping the people of Hong Kong. We can debate on facts, but if you are stupid, it can't really help Hong Kong. You actually believe there are some 2,000-3,000 people killed in Hong Kong. You think they have been killed secretly by the police and blah, blah, so on. I think you are a legislator, and this is pathetic. And then since June, there were, over 10,000 people paying their respect to a shrine with no one's actually dead. And then, every year we have a few thousand bodies discovered with unknown causes of theft. And then you blame that all on the police. And then a daughter who killed a girl who killed herself, the mother came out to say that she didn't commit suicide, and you say no, that's not her mother, and then really you can't tell, you can't tell or believe in the truth and so on. What can we do? Now, as Mr. Michael Loh pointed out, I'm also very unhappy about certain government departments. The first one has to be the RTHK, and then what about those who are poisoning our students in the past few months? Let's not even talk about liberal studies. What about these poems that are disguise of cursing the police, and then there are teachers who say that police officers and their families should die and so on. If you want to talk about pay deduction, these people ought to be included. Mr. Peter Shiu. Well, how many meetings, how many hours of discussion have we had on this item? At least, over 20 hours, at least 3-4 meetings. Oh, 6 meetings, actually, about 24 hours. Okay, I've expressed my view in the past about the civil service pay rise. Is actually to reflect the rise in inflation. Is the treatment is not any different than that for any other salaried workers. The pay rise is not based on performance. It's just that we're trying to keep up with inflation, so everyone gets the same pay rise. Now, some members saying that they don't want a pay rise. We've talked about it for so many hours. They wouldn't approve the item. The reason they give is because of the police. They said that maybe the police haven't done something properly in the past few months. Now, I'm not going to say that all police officers have not done anything wrong. No, I wouldn't say that. But is it true that all police officers have been at fault? If there are individual officers who haven't performed properly, you could complain against them, or you could even raise these cases here for discussion. You're saying that the entire police force is at fault, and it's not fair to say that. And for that reason, all civil servants don't get a pay rise, and you are taking up so much time here. Is it really right? Well, if that logic works, I can quote an example. In the past few months, we see people hurling bricks, causing damage, or committing arson, or beating up people. These are Hong Kong people too. Are we saying so? Should we say that for these people, we shouldn't give them the $10,000 payout? In that case, we can't pay the $10,000 to everyone in Hong Kong because of these people. Does it make sense? Here we talk about a handful of people who have broken the law, so we will let the police arrest them, and then the judge will hand out a sentence. How can we use that as a reason to say that everyone in Hong Kong shouldn't get the $10,000? So it's the same logic here. How can you say, therefore, that all civil servants should be denied a pay rise, or you're dragging out things for them? Now, for most civil servants, I'm sure they have their own savings. This, minor pay rise, won't affect them in much in a way. But then at the same time, there are NGOs under the mechanism. Because we're dragging this out, some in the NGO won't get a back pay. They are the innocent victims. It's not fair to them. Now, really, let's not drag it out any further. There are many other funding items on works projects and so on. Many of the contractors, especially small contractors, have been complaining to me they're really suffering. We are going to put them all out of business soon. I want to say categorically that I'm against this motion to adjourn the item. Well, with your hard work, Mr. Chairman, we are here at the meeting, even if we have to wear a mask. Why? Because we want to perform the duties as members of the Finance Committee to consider the various government funding proposals. But then it is sad. On this item, civil service pay adjustment, we've had discussion at so many meetings for so many hours. At the last Finance Committee meeting before the Chinese New Year, I and my colleagues thought finally we would be able to vote on the item. But then this motion to adjourn was proposed. Today, I think the people of Hong Kong could see this live broadcast, and you see starting from 10 a.m. the opposition camp has been resorting to various means to try to stall the proceedings. Now, before the holiday, you had scheduled additional meetings to approve the various funding items on works projects. That was before summer. But then on the 1st of July, of course, this building suffered serious damage, so we couldn't even schedule additional meeting. Last financial year, the Public Works Subcommittee approved works amounting to about $140 billion, but unfortunately, these items haven't made their way to the Finance Committee too. So we're still trying to catch up. We're trying to clear the backlog. And then there are about still $40 billion worth of items not yet considered at the Finance Committee. And then at the Public Works Subcommittee, also progress is really slow. For new funding items costing about $20 billion. So we need to wait for the Finance Committee to clear the backlog, and then we could deal with funding items for this financial year. Now, in this financial year, there are also projects costing over $100 billion and closely related to people's livelihoods. So I hope very much we could end the discussion on this motion to adjourn, and then we could put this item on civil service pay adjustment to a vote. And then we could proceed with the many other items on the agenda. Please lead us to meet on these items. I don't mind to come to meetings wearing a face mask. You know, the construction sector is really suffering, and such delay is hurting the people and hurting everyone in Hong Kong.
Is anyone else want to talk about adjourning this item? Tatter is not here, so he won't be able to provide a response. So I'll put this item to a vote. This finance committee will, this is about adjourning the item about civil service pay adjustment. If this item is rejected, then the civil service will not get a pay rise this year. Division bells rung for 5 minutes. Sorry, let me. If someone votes in favor and adjourns this item, then we will stop the discussion about the civil service pay rise. So civil service will not get a rise. Let me be clear. If this adjournment motion is passed, is carried, then we will not discuss this item. So civil servants will not get a pay rise. The arrangement, after we put this to a vote, if we adjourn this item, then we will not discuss it. Previously, there were 8 members who did not get to speak. After they speak, then we will move on to the 37A motions. The 8 members, let me read out their names. Alvin Young, with Ray Chen, 2 minutes. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 1 minute. Mr. Claudia Mo, 1 minute. Andrew Wen, 1 minute. Eddie Chu, 1 minute. Tanya Chen, 1 minute. Leung Yiu Chung, 1 minute.
In
a moment, we will talk about that in detail. We have 8, but then we'll read them out. Members coming in, so let me just say that do we agree that we should adjourn this item about civil service pay adjustment?
現在
Voting begins. Voting stops. We have the result. For 33 against, 0 abstention. The motion is negative. We'll continue with the questions. Mr. Alfred Yuan, 2 minutes. Chair. After several meetings, 6 months ago, all the way to now, why are we so adamantly against this item about the civil service pay? As other members just raised, because the police is involved. We sincerely ask the government to single out the pay raise for the police force and treat it independently. If we did that, then the civil servants would have enjoyed the pay rise. Why are we still dragging this to this day? Because the government didn't listen. Why are we having so many meetings? Every time we come to you with justification. Ted Hui is not here today, but even then, he saw the need to summon government officials to this council. If you find our request so unreasonable, then Chairman, you wouldn't spend so much time dealing with the motion because there is merit. There is a point to the request. But even to this day, no one from the police showed up at this committee. The government is so adamantly behind the police force. That's why so many people are so angry. The pro-establishment camp just then was saying that was saying how good a job the government was doing, but then look at what happened in district council elections in November. The Hong Kong people made it clear, sent you this message loud and clear at the district council elections last year. We talked about the cut in the pay for the civil service. Mr. Wei Kwong had a point. We're in difficult times. How could you have this audacity to say we should get a pay rise? Well, how about my message for the pro-establishment camp? Well, you shouldn't be those who asked government officials to take a pay cut. Please vote against this pay rise. That's how you can be consistent. Otherwise, that's just inconsistent of you, hypocrisy of you. But that's you. But that's what I expect of you, Mr. Ray Chen. Now in Hong Kong, the police are law unto themselves. The police chief is apparently even more powerful than the chief executive or the financial secretary. Yesterday, I put this question to the financial secretary. He was saying we put this 25% in resources allocated to the police force. So the police force asks you for it, and then you just let it. Civil Service Bureau. Haven't you looked at the accounts? Haven't you looked at the request? 2,500 people. New recruits for the police force. Even the police college can train that many people. You're just granting whatever the police chief Chris Tang is asking you. You're giving Chris Tang a blank check. Yesterday, we had police going to Lok Fu, intimidating the residents on the block. They were threatening to set the dogs upon the people. What kind of police officers? You see, 4.75% increase in the pay for the upper echelons of the police. For the middle, you have just about 5%. Are you really fine with taking this pay increase? This pay rise was for April last year. What has the Civil Service Bureau been doing as a gatekeeper? Look at what bad things the police have been doing. Has the Civil Service Bureau not done anything about the police force? Civil servants went to rallies and then you issued warnings. The Civil Service Bureau issued warnings and then the police went to all kinds of dinner gatherings. Has the Service Bureau said anything about doing anything improper? My question for you, the civil service pay, so that includes the police force. The police force will also have another 2,500 new positions. Can they indeed hire 2,500 people? If you don't get the police chief here, and I will get you to answer the question, Secretary of the Civil Service. Chairman, all government departments, when they apply for the pay, when they apply for the increase in the establishment, they do this on the basis of their operational need. And that's why it forms part of the budget. And at the finance meetings, the heads of departments will get a chance to explain, to justify these requests. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, 1 minute. Joshua Law, you are being unfair, extremely unfair to other civil servants. You let the police force off the hook, you let them do whatever they like, but then other civil servants are suffering the consequences as a result of this civil service pay adjustment being dragged on for so long. Have you done any soul searching? Are you being fair to the 150,000 odd civil servants? You are the head of the Civil Service Bureau. You're making it sound like you couldn't do anything about so many things. You're saying that you don't have that much control. So many people are discontented about the police force, but then you can't do anything about that, and then everyone going under together. Ms. Claudia Mo, 1 minute. I want to make one thing clear. Civil service pay rise. We're saying you can't single out the police force pay rise. But back in 2013, the Police Force Council and Discipline Services Consultative Council, they were hoping that they could have a pay scale independent of the civil service pay scale. There was talk about having their own autonomy, and now the police force is saying they want to hire another 2,500 people. Hey, look at the police to citizen ratio in Hong Kong. It's not just the highest in Asia, it's among the highest in the world. Why do you need so many police officers? Is it because so many currently serving police officers are resigning? Chair, as I said just then, increase in manpower for each government department. The requests are made on the basis of operational need. There is ample justification for these requests. What's your justification? What do you need for so many new hires? Mr. Andrew Wen, 1 minute. Chair, we know what the crux of the matter is. The police force over the past year have been disappointing. That's a problem. But Joshua Law is rather let everyone go down together instead of having Chris Tang over here to explain things. The police are acting arrogantly in our society, hurting our people, but no one's realizing what the problem is, and someone just saying taking matters into their own law, beating people up. Hey, look at the Fukien gangs. Because the police turn a blind eye to other people beating people up. Is that what the police should be doing? That's even worse than acting as criminals. Someone died, and who said that they should pop open a bottle of champagne? Who said that? Has anyone condemned the police force? They said they should open a bottle of champagne. That's ridiculous, preposterous. Chairman, we will oppose the police pay rise. Eddie Chu, 1 minute. We're talking about the civil service pay rise. We're still talking about it after the budget was announced. The Hong Kong people should know where we are heading. The Communist Party is pulling the strings behind. Hong Kong is heading towards a police state. Out of the 7,000 or so civil servants newly hired, there will be around 40% allocated for the police force. Why does Hong Kong need so many police officers? Why is Hong Kong turning into a police state? Because of the Chinese Communist Party. The Communist Party wants to deny Hong Kong people freedom, liberties. That's why it's turning to draconian laws. After so many hours of discussion, one thing is clear. The police are above the law now. They are above the senior officials we see in this room. Think about it for yourself. Next, Ms. Tanya Chen. Joshua Law, I'm not sure if you could recall this. There was once we had this discussion. You're a senior official in the civil servant system. You're part of the civil service. What's your view on the political neutrality of civil servants is on their professionalism? I went through all the papers today. We talked about the district officers. In times of district council meetings, Why were we seeing this walkout led by the district officer? For the general public, over the past 2 months or so, we saw this halt in the Legislative Council, and we saw all kinds of unprofessional behavior from the police, and you are the head of this civil service. A police union threatened even the Chief Secretary, Matthew Chan Kin-chung. Then how can you lead? We're talking about civil service pay. We can't even talk about it.
Mr. Leung Yu-chung, 1 minute. Well, in the budget, it's just announced for the first time, everyone in Hong Kong will get $10,000. Well, we would be happy about it. But then recently, many have said that if the police force is going to get so much increase in expenditure, they'd rather not take that $10,000. So what does it show? It shows that what sort of image the police are giving to the people over the past months. And then the government ignores that. You are actually plowing in more resources into the police force. On top of that, we just making simple request here, that is with the civil service pay adjustment, can we take out the section related to police? No, you wouldn't do that. And then we asked if the person in charge of the police force would come here to take our questions, and no, you won't do that. Now, some members mentioned maybe individual police officers didn't act properly. But even if those are individual cases, you should let us question them. Okay. Now, I've received 8 motions under 37A before the Chinese New Year. The motion moved by Dr. K.K. Kwok, I think it is not directly relevant. So, Mr. Eddie Chu, yes? A point of order. Now, in accordance with Rule 37 of the Finance Committee procedure, I would like to move a motion of no confidence in you. I don't think you are in a position to continue chairing the meeting. So you want to proceed to 37A or a motion of no confidence? No, a motion under 37. That is, you should not be chairing this item. Because when we first talked about the points of order, you misinterpreted the rules of procedure. So you're moving a motion of no confidence because you believe I have misinterpreted the rules of procedure? Well, yes, for the meeting on the 21st of February, it is not a special meeting. It is a continuation of the last meeting. If you insist on that. Well, Mr. Eddie Chu, the legal advisor, has already explained that, and you've agreed that if you accepted her explanation, we will not dwell on this further. No, the legal advisor didn't give an explanation on the first part. He only gave an explanation on the first part. Well, okay, then let's ask the clerk to explain that again. No, so you are saying that now there's a precedent. As long as the government tells you this is an urgent item, then you could start a new table of mahjong and a third table of mahjong. So you can then deal with 3 or 4 urgent items, the so-called urgent items in tandem. So that seems to be a position. So if that's the case, you are saying, but then we're saying the principle is that there should be just one queue for items. Now, I think you're using mahjong to compare that to a meeting. I think is neither here nor there, and it's not, And then the legal advice was given with full legitimate reason. It's not based on quicksand. Now, you have raised this point. It's fine. You can submit it in writing, and we will deal with it if it's reasonable. But I can tell you the general principles. Now, how do we move a motion of no confidence? The major consideration is that I have pecuniary interest. But if you think my judgment is not right, I am afraid that we won't call a meeting on that. Anyway, you can write into me. Mr. Eddie Chair, you're going to talk about your motion under 37A. Let's ring the bell for 5 minutes.
This
committee requests that after this discussion item is passed, regardless of the conclusion, the administration should continue to freeze the pay of police officers until an independent inquiry has been set up to deal with the investigation of the large number of suspected negligence of duty cases by the police in the second half of 2019. Should wait till the investigation is completed. Well, many members have asked me to state clearly what we are doing now. That is, we have to consider whether we will deal with motion 37A. It's not to discuss whether we should proceed with the motion under 37A. And it's just for members to indicate their views, and it's just for the government's reference. It's up to them whether to follow our decision on this motion. So it's wrong to say that after we pass this motion, then the government must observe the result. No, it's definitely wrong. It's like last time where we voted out the motion on the cash payout of $10,000, but still the government proceeded with it. So it's the same. It's not the case that because we pass this motion, the government can't do what they plan to do. Okay, voting begins. Voting is closed. The results are displayed. 21 for, 34 against. So I declare that we would not deal with this motion. Next, Mr. James Toh. Mr. Chairman, as the chairman of the Finance Committee, if members are voting on a matter and they may vote for or against the item, and then as the chairman you may explain legally whether the decision is binding. But if you say that the decision is not binding, but you do not explain the legal position, then if the majority of members vote for the motion, actually the government may have the moral obligation to follow it. So I hope you'll be careful with your wordings. So yes, let me say that therefore the government may have the moral obligation to follow the decision, but it's not binding. Okay, Mr. Gary Chan. Mr. Gary Chan, please. In accordance with the Finance Committee procedure, I propose to shorten the division bell from 5 minutes to 1 minute. Okay, Mr. Gary Chan proposed us that the division bell shall be rung for 1 minute instead of 5 minutes. Those in favor, hands up, please. Okay, let's have a division bell for 5 minutes to vote on this. Well, you're not new to this Finance Committee. You've been here for over 3 years. You know there is no chance for debate.
提一提大家呢，我
A reminder, we're voting on whether we are going to shorten the division bell from 5 minutes to 1 minute. Voting begins. Voting's closed. Result 33 for, 22 against, 0 abstention. The motion is carried. Next, Mr. Alvin Young's 37A motion. Divisional bell. Yes, divisional bell will be rung for 1 minute. According to Rule 37A of Procedure of Finance Committee, I move that the pay rise for the district officers for 18 districts be suspended until the district officer pledges to fully help the 18 district councils carry on with their policies and livelihood policies and district projects, and pledge that they will not disqualify candidates for their political positions. This is a vote on whether we would deal with this. It's about whether we deal with this motion.
現在開始表決。
Voting begins. Voting's closed. Results 22 for, 35 against, 0 abstention. We're not dealing with this motion. Third motion from Dr. K.K. Kwok. According to Rule 37A of the Procedure of the Finance Committee, I move that. I'm sorry. Hang on. We should make reference to results from the polls from credible organizations for the pay rise for the discipline services. Let me just say something here. Says Dr. K.K. Kwok, but then signed as Dennis Kwok. Is it from Dennis Kwok? Is it a joint motion? Just let me know whose motion this is. Is it a motion of Dr. K.K. Kwok or Dennis Kwok? Chair, can you let me read the motion again? It's a joint motion. So we take this as a motion by Dennis Kwok. The bell be rung for 1 minute, please. 1 minute for the bell, please. Please, we're voting on this, whether we deal with 37A motion. Voting begins. Voting's closed. We have the results here. 22 for, 34 against, 0 abstention. We are not dealing with this motion. Fourth motion. 1 minute for the divisional bell. In accordance with Rule 37A of the Procedure of the Finance Committee, I move that This committee requests that the authorities set up with regard to the civil service pay adjustment in 2019-20, I move that the district pay for the district officers be dealt with separately and voted on separately.
現在開始表決。
Voting begins. Voting's closed. Results 22 for, 35 against, 0 abstention. We're not dealing with this motion. Fifth, from Jeremy Tam. 1 minute for the bell. In accordance with the Rules 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that the force has been most unsatisfactory in their work in dealing with a large-scale protest, highly unprofessional, brutality, abuse of power, arbitrary arrest. There were so many breaches of the police general orders. Most actions are most heinous. Therefore, this committee requests that the authorities, in accordance with Article 11, Article 100 of the Basic Law, that the pay for the police force should be cut to the and lower to the level before the SAR was established on the 1st of January 1997. Voting begins. Voting's closed. Results 22 for, 34 against, 0 abstention. We're not dealing with this motion. Next, for Mr. Ray Chen, 1 minute for the bell. In accordance with Rule 37A of the Finance Committee procedure, I move that as Hong Kong saw rapid deterioration of the economy over the past 6 months, there will be a huge deficit for the government. This committee asks that the authorities adjust the pay for the directorate and senior levels of the civil service with effect from the 1st of April 2019. The rise should be adjusted from 4.75% and adjusted lower to 1% to save public money and ride out the difficult times with the public. A reminder, we're deciding whether to deal with this ad hoc motion. We're not talking about whether we support the motion itself. Voting begins. Voting's closed. Results 22 for, 35 against, 0 abstention. We're not dealing with this motion. Last one from Dr. Fernando Cheng. 1 minute for the bell, please. In accordance with Finance Committee procedure Rule 37A, I move that the principles for the civil service pay adjustment should include: first, we should narrow the difference between the highest and lowest levels of pay, and after 2 years, the differential should be less than 20 times, and second, should minimize the gender pay gap, and every year the difference should be announced every year for the gender pay gap, and three, there should be monitoring for the implementation of the adjustments in subvented organizations. Voting begins. Voting's closed. Results 22 for, 35 against, 0 abstention. We're not dealing with this ad hoc motion. Anyone, if there's no other questions, I will put this item civil service pay adjustment to a vote. 1 minute for the vote.
冇幫手幫警察加人工啦！
喂，你唔好噴到我啊！噴到我，喂，另外，
警暴可耻，警暴可耻，反對警暴，反對警暴，反對警察加人工，反對警暴，反對警暴，反對警暴，反對警暴，反對警暴，反對警暴。人哋都唔好幫警察加人工啊！財政預算案已經變到警察城市啦，加6500人。
各位議員翻。
Members, please return to your seat. We are putting the item to a vote. Please return to your seats.
加咁多人，仲俾你加人工，加到一個都冇落嚟，明明打人私刑，可以冇落嚟。
現在開始。
We are putting the item to a vote. The voting begins. Voting's closed. We have the results: 36 for, 19 against, 1 abstention. I declare that the item is passed. We're done with this item. Meeting's adjourned for 10 minutes.